flood. I doubt they had huge polar ice caps before the flood came. I flew up as far as we could fly in Canada and then drove 2 hours north of that, way up into central Saskatchewan. We were only right about here. There's a whole lot of earth above us, but they said this is about the limit of habitable land where you can actually do farming, because north of here, the seasons are too harsh. You can't do any farming. There is a huge chunk of planet Earth, north and south, near the poles, that is simply unusable for farmland. Now, the Bible says God formed the world to be inhabited. I don't think what we have today is anything similar to what Adam and Eve saw. Next thing you need to keep in mind, the moon has craters on it, but we never see the moon get struck by anything. Where did these craters come from on the moon? Even Mercury has craters on it. Where did these craters come from? Mars has a canyon much larger than Grand Canyon. When the scientists studied this canyon on Mars, they said, wow, this canyon formed in a matter of weeks. Because they say there was melting water in one of the craters, it overflowed the rim and washed out this canyon very, very quickly. Well, duh. Why can they see a canyon on Mars where we can't find any water for sure and say this thing formed quickly, and you can look at Grand Canyon on planet Earth and can't conclude that water formed that canyon very quickly? I don't understand the stupidity involved here. Looks to me like you ought to be able to see that. As a ridge at the edge of the crater gave way and this canyon formed in a matter of months, certainly less than a year, said one of the scientists. Next thing to keep in mind, it's called the Meissner effect. How many have ever seen two magnets? You put them together and the one will float on top of the other one. You know what I'm talking about here? It's called the Meissner effect. That's how the Japanese trains go. We rode on one of those trains when I was in Japan. Man, they go flying down the tracks with magnetic levitation. No resistance that way, no friction. Next thing to keep in mind, there are comets flying around through space, and these comets are extremely cold, 300 to 400 below 0 Fahrenheit. Don't lick it. I need to find out if any of you are or were as dumb as I was as a kid. How many of you have a piece of your tongue stuck to a pump handle or a flagpole someplace on planet Earth right now because you licked it when it was cold? Come on now, be honest. Put your hand up. Okay, there's several. All right. Don't lick something 300 below 0. Trust me on that one. Okay, that'll be the last thing you lick for a while. If you throw a snowball too fast, it'll break apart. You couldn't possibly shoot a snowball out of a cannon. If you did, it would simply break apart in pieces before it even got out the end of the barrel. So a super cold ice meteor, if it were coming toward the Earth, would build up speed because of the inverse square law. As it got going faster and faster, it would break up out in space into a bazillion little ice crystals. Those would then shower down on the Earth as super cold snow. Next thing you need to keep in mind, the Earth has a very strong magnetic field, but it's getting weaker. At the time of the flood, it was probably about 15 to 20 times stronger than it is today. The magnetic field is weakening. The magnetic field would deflect super cold ice crystals to the poles, most of them. Also, super cold ice is easily statically charged. The northern lights are caused because of the Earth's magnetic field. How many have ever seen the northern lights? Unbelievably gorgeous. If you've never seen them, it's worth just get up there. So I've seen them in South Dakota and up in Canada. Unbelievably beautiful. The northern lights are something worth seeing. Anyway, the pre-flood world was very different. The world probably had a canopy of ice or water above the atmosphere. We cover that on video 2. Now, there are some creationists, including Walt Brown, who disagree. They say there was no canopy. And I think the arguments they use can be easily answered. And I'll be glad to discuss that if you'd like more. Next thing to keep in mind. Who on earth was Peleg? Genesis chapter 10, and I hate to say this about the Bible, so God, don't listen for just a minute, okay? But Genesis 10 is boring, okay? As you read through that chapter, it's got all these big names that nobody on earth can pronounce except Alexander Scorby, you know. So-and-so begat so-and-so, and he begat so-and-so, and he begat so-and-so. And you're reading through this long, boring chapter of everybody begatting everybody, and all of a sudden you come across verse 25. And it says, unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg. For in his days was the earth divided. And his brother's name was Joktan. Well, now hold on a minute. Peleg is the only guy, it doesn't say anything about anybody else. Why does it say something about Peleg? It says in his days was the earth divided. And then it says his brother's name was Joktan. Nobody else gets their brother mentioned. Why would his brother be mentioned? Well, the word Joktan means shorten. Peleg means divided. Peleg was born about 100 years after the flood. Notice he only lived to be 239. His daddy and grandpa and great-grandpa lived into their 400s. What was different? What happened in the days of Peleg? Next thing you need to keep in mind, the pre-flood world had a canopy of water above and water under the crust of the earth. Okay? Now, I made a decision years ago as a new Christian. I was 16 when I got saved, and all the atheists in my city started coming after me, trying to get me converted, away from Christianity. And I had some real problems believing some of the things in the Bible. They were showing me supposed contradictions and all that. We'll cover more on that on video 7. But I had to make a decision as a 16-year-old new Christian. I said, Lord, I'm going to believe your book until somebody can prove it's wrong. Some of my friends decided they're going to doubt the Bible until it's proven right. I think that's a mistake. I think I made the right decision. I said, God, I'm going to believe you even for the things I don't understand. And he's proven himself on just about every one of them. There's a couple I still got questions about. There was an atheist one time came to the preacher and said, Preacher, I don't believe anything in the Bible. I only believe science. He said, Preacher, if you can prove one verse out of the Bible scientifically, I'll believe it. The preacher said, well, okay. He grabbed the atheist around the neck, grabbed his nose, and began twisting his nose. Pretty soon, of course, the blood is pouring down his face, and the atheist said, what on earth are you doing? He said, I'm proving the Bible. It says the wringing of the nose bringeth forth blood. I don't recommend you do that unless you get a really hardcore atheist, then you might want to try that one. But I'm going to give you the Hovind theory. Now, this is supposed to be good teaching technique. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. You get all that? We're going to go through it very quickly, 8 simple steps of what I think caused the flood and explain all these strange phenomena on the planet. Then we'll go into them in a little bit more detail, and then we'll close this down. Noah and the animals got safely into the ark. A 300-degree below zero ice meteor came flying toward the earth and broke up in space. As it was breaking up, some of the fragments got caught and became the rings around the planets. They made the craters on the moon, the craters on some of the planets, and what was left over came down and splattered on top of the North and South Pole. The super cold snow fell on the poles mostly, burying the mammoths standing up. The dump of ice on the North and South Pole cracked the crust of the earth, releasing the fountains of the deep. The spreading ice caused the ice age effects, the glacier effects that we see. It buried the mammoths, made the earth wobble around for a few thousand years. And it made the canopy collapse that used to protect the earth and opened up the fountains of the deep. During the first few months of the flood, the dead animals would settle out and dead plants and get buried. They would become coal if they're plants and oil if they're animals. And those are still found today in huge graveyards. Fossils found in graveyards, oil found in big pockets under the ground. During the last few months of the flood, the unstable plates of the earth would shift around. Some places lift up, other places sink down. That's going to form ocean basins and mountain ranges. And the runoff would cause incredible erosion like Grand Canyon in a couple of weeks. Over the next few hundred years, the ice caps would slowly melt back, retreating to their current size. The added water from the ice melt would raise the ocean level, creating what's called a continental shelf. It would also absorb carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which allows more radiation to get in, which is going to shorten people's lifespans. And in the days of Peleg, it finally took effect. The earth still today shows the effects of this devastating flood. Now, a little more detail on each one. God told Noah, the Lord said to Noah, come thou. Did you catch that? Listen very carefully. What did God tell Noah to do?